This is my Honda CRF 250R, and it's the poster child of a typical Japanese dirt bike. If you've ever seen a dirt bike and wondered what a part is called or what it might do, then you've come to the right video. And if you're an expert mechanic, see if you can come up with an alternative name for every part I list down in the comments. Here's your first one: a muffler instead of a silencer. Dirt bikes are built up from a frame, and in that frame lies the engine, usually a single-cylinder 2-stroke or 4-stroke engine. In this case, a 4-stroke, and you can tell that because it doesn't have a massive balloon exhaust pipe sticking out called an expansion chamber that all 2-strokes have. On the right-hand side of the engine, there's a kickstart that flings out to start the engine, and folds away neatly when riding. Most riders have fought with this at some point or another. On the left-hand side of the engine, there's a choke, which is used to start the engine when the bike is cold and pushed back in once it's running. The tail of the bike and the rider's seat all connect to the subframe, which protrudes off the back of the frame. And underneath the seat, you'll find the airbox and air filter. Out the front of the engine stems the exhaust, which winds through the bike and connects to a silencer or two under the tail. That is the root of a dirt biker's favorite soundtrack. What gives a dirt bike its distinctive and aggressive appearance is all the red and white body panels, collectively known as plastics. This bike is currently missing its brightly colored graphics called a sticker kit that usually cover the plastics. Directly in front of the seat is the fuel cap with breather pipe that has no lock and simply screws off to refill the petrol tank directly below it. That is usually very small. To keep the engine cool, there is a radiator mounted to each side of the frame behind the side panels. They have water running through them and are cooled by air rushing through them when moving. The shroud with fins on it is there to protect the radiators from debris and to help guide air into them. Although dirt bikes always look awesome, the rider's view is arguably quite boring. It starts with handlebars and a bar pad to cushion any unplanned contact you might have with the bars. The right hand is preoccupied with a throttle, covered by a grip for comfort, and is twisted backwards to accelerate, unlocking the addictive adrenaline and sometimes fear, which in turn usually results in reaching for the front brake lever in panic, directly in front of the throttle. And because this bike is fuel injected, it also has an engine map button to toggle between the standard, relaxed and aggressive maps to alter how the engine responds to your inputs, which comes in handy when you let your girlfriend ride your bike. The left hand gets a lot less to do, with a static grip, a clutch lever used to pull off and change gear, and a kill switch to turn the engine off when you've had enough riding, which doesn't happen often. Handlebar clamps, or bar risers, connect the bars to the yoke that's gripping both fork legs, which provide some much needed suspension when riding over rough terrain, generally with a lot of suspension travel, meaning the distance that the fork can compress. The forks are joined together once again at the triple tree, which, altogether, pivot around the headstock of the frame with a steering stem that is fastened at the top of the yoke with a nut. And I don't mean the rider. At the top of the forks, the suspension settings can be altered to make it stiffer or softer based on rider preference and weight, while at the bottom, the silver part of the forks is called the stanchion. and has fork protectors to stop any debris striking and damaging them while riding. To finish off the business end of the bike, an axle slides through the forks and front wheel. Off-road bike tires are called knobblies because, well, they're covered in knobs that help get traction in sand and mud, and are usually run at relatively low pressures for the same reason. Generally, a tube sits between the rim and the tire and is inflated with a typical Schrader valve stem. There's also another valve stem lookalike, but this one is called a rim lock and is basically there to clamp the tire to the rim to prevent the tire from spinning on the rim and ripping the valve off the tube. The rim is laced to the hub with spokes, and on the left hand side of the wheel there is a brake disc covered by a disc guard for protection and a brake caliper mounted to the fork that squeezes brake pads against the disc to bring the bike to a stop, or lock the back wheel for some fun. The rear wheel is much the same, except with a wider rear tire and a slightly smaller brake caliper and disc on the opposite side of the wheel. On the other side of the wheel, you'll find a large rear sprocket wrapped in a chain that connects to a smaller front sprocket on the engine to spin the back wheel. And the chain gets rather pampered, with a chain guide to prevent the chain from getting derailed by strange forces, a chain roller to protect the frame from the chain, and chain sliders to protect the swing arm. The rear wheel is connected to a swing arm with another axle that goes through chain adjusters to properly tension the chain. The swing arm itself pivots to provide suspension in the rear and is connected to the frame at the swing arm pivot and through a rear shock absorber and linkage. A brake line filled with brake fluid connects the brake caliper to the rear brake lever, which is operated by the rider's right foot, while the left foot uses a gear lever to change gears. There is usually a 5-speed sequential gearbox, meaning you have to go through all the gears and can't go from 5th to 2nd, for example. And a gentle half click will find you neutral, conveniently placed between 1st and 2nd. And the final point of contact for the rider is the foot pegs, with spikes for traction on the rider's boot. Of course, every part can be broken down once again into more parts, and every bike is slightly or dramatically different. But this should safely cover the basics and hopefully can help you out if you're just getting into dirt bikes. Hit the like button if it did, let me know if I missed any important parts, and I'll see you on the next ride.